Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Best on Wellbeing podcast. We continue the discussion about principles of spirituality. As explained in the previous episode, really, spirituality to me is what grounds us, what makes us really rooted in the ordinary day-to-day lives in a way that can truly support our well-being. Spirituality is ultimately a deep commitment to well-being for ourselves and for others. And as I said in the selfish kindness episode, ultimately it is for our well-being. We support the well-being of others ultimately because it's a very good way to support our own well-being. So we looked at the idea of radical responsibility in the previous episode, and today we want to look at what we'll call principle number 2 of spirituality, which is understanding rather than judgment. This is a really tricky one, a really tough one, and I'm certainly not going to claim to be an expert at the execution of this. It's very easy for my mind to judge people. It's very easy to get caught up in asserting something in my own mind about somebody else. It's very easy to get caught up in a conversation with people about somebody else and make certain statements that are judgmental. So I have certainly done all of the above. And so this is not about trying to describe some perfect state of zero judgment. But I would say that the spiritual path is to have a certain devotion to minimizing judgment as much as possible. And really, in all the great religious texts and traditions, overall, they all kind of say the same thing. It's better not to judge people. You know, the Bible in the Gospel of Matthew, everyone knows judge not lest ye be judged. Basically, I don't want to feel judged. So if I don't want to feel judged, then I should try not to judge others. And so pretty simple teaching. My favorite one, though, that I think is a practical way to think about it is from the Islamic tradition, from the Muslim faith, that it teaches that when there's a temptation or a movement in your own mind to judge somebody, the idea is to start coming up with different reasons to understand why they did what you're judging. So you have to constantly come up with more reasons for how they are, their behaviors, so on and so forth. And the recommendation is to come up with 10,000 different reasons before you judge them. Now, obviously, that's never going to happen. But basically, it's pointing to the direction, just don't judge, because just constantly try to understand. Constantly push your brain to try to understand somebody else. Try to figure out what's going on. Like sometimes we can easily get caught up in a judgment. That person is such an a-hole, if you will. And okay, but why? Why are they like that? What's their background? Did they have a tough day? They must have maybe had a tough day. What's their background? Do they have a good relationship with their parents? Maybe they never did. You kind of constantly refrain from judging and are constantly in the movement of understanding. And similar to when I talked about kind and courteousness, to be kind and courteous in all interactions, the idea of refraining from judgment as much as possible, again, is not for the other person. You're not trying to be nice in your mind by not judging the other person. Although that's one way to frame it. Like I said, don't judge other people because we don't want to be judged. Treat others like you want to be treated yourself. All these kind of fundamental principles. But on a deeper level, refraining from judgment, for me to make a continuous day-to-day effort to catch myself when I do judge people and to catch myself and minimize it and try to understand something instead of judge it is something that is good for me. It's something that will help me experience more well-being. It creates a much more flexible, fluid mind. One way to look about it is judgment is sort of a lack of mental movement. When you've judged somebody, you've declared a thing the way it is. It's kind of like rock solid. It's firm. It's in place. This is how it is. This is how this person is. And so that's a very firm sort of psychological structure. And when we talk about, health and well-being, movement, we had a whole discussion about just moving your body keeps you healthy. Well, psychological movement, fluidity is good for ourselves and our brain. Judgment is a lack of fluidity. It's there and it's in place. It's like you've just laid cement and now it's there. Whereas constantly pushing our mind to understand somebody else is fluid. You're constantly trying to the act of understanding somebody else creates movement in your brain. Why is it that way? What's happening? Why are they doing that? Like, where are they coming from? What's their side of things? What's going on through their head? Are they suffering? Are they going through a hard time? Just constant effort, or I like the word devotion, determination to understand rather than judge. It keeps the mind fluid. It keeps the mind nimble. It's the analogy about water, being the most beautiful, precious thing for life. Ultimately, it's so soft. Water is the softest thing. Water is soft. It's fluid. But at the end of the day, it's stronger than rock. It will win against rock. It will erode rock every single time. And so judgment is more like the rock, and understanding is the fluid. And so as we stay fluid, we allow ourselves definitely a much more mental freedom to not get hard in a stance. Because again, one of the episodes we discussed was lightheartedness. How do we be lighthearted? How do we stay less heavy? How do we enjoy our day-to-day lives and just be nimble on our feet and just feel light inside? Well, one thing to consider here is that judgment is heavy. It creates, like I said, a psychological structure in our mind. And then you have that judgment, and then you add another judgment, and then you add another judgment, and the judgments start to get heavy. So engaging ourselves with determination to really try to understand, really try to refrain from judgment, constantly trying to catch ourselves in that sort of mental movement of wanting to judge somebody, is very good for us. It's very good for our health. It's very good for our brain. It's very good for being lighthearted. Now, it can be uncomfortable to refrain from judgment. There is something you can all notice, and I've certainly noticed it in my inner experience, that when we judge somebody, there's this pleasure that comes with it. There's like kind of a deeper pleasure. Like, yeah, I'm judging them. They're like that, and I'm not like that, and there's like, yeah, it feels good. I want to judge, and that intensity, that pleasure, it can feel good temporarily, but it's almost like a drug, if you will. It can feel good, but ultimately it's eroding your well-being. Okay. There's a big difference between trying to really understand, to send love, to try to understand, avoid judgment. And then sometimes you get gifted with a sense of, ooh, I feel really peaceful right now, a sense of pleasure that emerges naturally. But engaging in judgment, and it's like it feels good, and then almost like a dopamine hit of just and then there's that person's like that too, yeah, and it's these pleasure hits in our brain and so we keep doing it ultimately. But that will erode our health. It would erode our well-being. We'll become more and more and more rigid, just as more and more drugs, even though you get a pleasure hit along the way, ultimately erodes your well-being and leads to absolute misery. So pleasure, as we discussed, pleasure is not well-being. Well-being can emerge from pleasure. Well-being will not emerge from pleasure, but pleasure can emerge if you're feeling well and you're doing the right, you're trying to sustain your well-being, you're strengthening your system. Then pleasure can come up, but pleasure itself will not produce well-being. It will erode well-being if pleasure comes of its own, independent, if you will, and engaging in something that ultimately is not supportive of our well-being will erode our well-being when we engage in too much pleasure. And so judgment does, for many people, offer a sense of pleasure, but there's a major cost to it. In fact, the cost is very heavy for true well-being, true spirituality. Okay, and it's okay to we want to let go of the idea that I'm an understanding person. I don't judge others because I'm nice to people. Like that's not really the point. We refrain from judgment because it's good for us. I try to refrain from judgment. I don't always succeed. I want to be very clear. I often fail at this. I fail a lot. But I try to go in this direction because it supports my well being. It's good for me. It helps me to be a happy person. And it ultimately is a very important principle of spirituality. Thank you, folks. We'll catch you next time.